So today we have an awesome little segment from Ron Barron, a legendary Tesla investor, and he's also got money in SpaceX. And so he's going to reason with us why he can sleep at night having all of this money invested in only one man, Elon Musk. So let's watch.
I met Elon in 2010. It took me 4 years of doing research before we ultimately decided to invest. We've made about 20 times our money since then, and we've probably made about $5.5 billion in profits so far, and I think we'll make another 5 times in the next 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years. So basically, we invested because I thought there was a big upside. I thought he was a brilliant guy. I still think that. We continue to work on our research in this company all the time. Virtually every week, we're talking to someone there. I was out in Palo Alto a week ago, and I was there for an afternoon, and I met with two executives who were the people who were in charge of autonomous driving and also in charge of compute, of what NVIDIA does, the chips. So what we're always doing, we're trying to understand how a business operates and what's special about it and why other people can't do the same thing. And in the case of Tesla, we are convinced that people cannot do what they're doing, and that ultimately it's not just going to be a car company, it's not just going to be a battery company, but ultimately all the other car companies, which 50 years ago elected to become much more profitable and outsource supplies and compute to other people, we're going to be like Intel was inside of computers. This is going to be Tesla inside of cars. No one else can possibly compete.
It used to be that car companies would cut their margins razor thin to prevent other startups from entering the auto market, but now there's a shift. Now the new barrier to entry is data, and if you don't have data, you're not going to be able to enter the car market. But in order to get data, you have to have cars on the road. So it's actually becoming impossible as a startup to enter the auto market as an autonomous future becomes a reality. And if you're an existing car company with cars already on the road, how are you going to attract the top talent to collect data and interpret it to get to artificial general intelligence if you've been outsourcing your software for the last 50 years? So I think we're going to see a massive turnover in executives from people that specialize in marketing to people that are engineering focused like Elon, because how else are you going to attract the top talent? In the future, you're not going to be able to pay them a huge money to pull them away from Tesla because you're not going to be making any money. So you really need to start getting some engineering minded people at the helm to start to think about the future. Now let's see what Ron Barron has to say about SpaceX.
We think that over the next 3 years, it's likely that they will go public and with Starlink, which is the internet for the planet. And we think that we're going to make a double in the company by then. We think that the business, which is now valued for 150 billion, we think at that time will be worth 250 to 300 billion. And we think that by 2030, it's likely they will be worth somewhere around 5 or 600 billion. And then in the 2030s, that's when I could expect to make another 10 times our money. So we could make over the next 15 or 20 years, we can make 30 to 50 times our money in SpaceX. That's why we invested.
If SpaceX goes public, would you sell some Tesla to buy SpaceX? What would your split be? How much SpaceX would you buy in comparison to Tesla? Because personally, over the next 20 years, I see Tesla's profits being gargantuan compared to SpaceX, just simply because of the opportunity that I think artificial general intelligence represents. I still would like to hold some SpaceX, maybe if it's the right price. And I don't think you can go wrong in either direction in the foreseeable future just because of the competitive advantage that both of these companies hold in their industries.
And what he's doing, like in Tesla, we are having the leading company that makes electric cars, and that led to autonomous driving. And autonomous driving is something that ultimately we're going to be able to charge. Tesla will be able to charge $2,000, roughly $2,000, $2,500 a year at least, for the ability for this car to drive by itself.
$2,000 a year is actually only about $166 a month. And in my Tesla valuation model, I forecast that recurring revenue from robotaxis to be substantially higher than Ron does, because I think that that car that's autonomous will be able to generate much more than $166 a month in the future. And if you want access to my valuation model and to my price targets all the way into 2035, the link is in the description.
In the case of space, what they're going to be doing there, the innovation that other people can't possibly do, is the fact that they are able to launch rockets and reuse them over and over and over again. So as a result of that, it costs other people to get to space $100 million, $200 million. It costs us a fraction of that amount. And when Starship launches, it's going to cost us a fraction again of that account. So basically, we can get our satellites to space for a very low cost. and we're going to have ultimately 30,000 satellites, circling the Earth, providing internet to every point on Earth. There was just an article in the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago that talks about how they're trying to get internet, a government program, government subsidized program, trying to get internet into the mountains in Nevada. And it costs $53,000 per house, which happened to be more than the houses are worth, because it costs $16,000 a mile to put wire in the ground. Instead of going to Tesla, where you have internet broadband from space, and it would cost you $500 a house. So $53,000 a house, $500 a house. It boggles the mind. It makes you understand how the government, how are we letting this country be managed that you're going to spend $53,000 instead of $500? Crazy.
I actually thought the movie Don't Look Up with Leonardo DiCaprio did a great job of depicting how sluggish and bloated these government subsidy space projects are. And DiCaprio's character actually reminds me of Elon, because how he's trying to convince everybody in the world that a big comet is coming to destroy them and nobody believes him. Well, Elon is trying to be proactive and get ahead of any extinction level event, and so he saw that the government wasn't capable of doing that, so he started SpaceX. But then ignorant people who blindly hate on capitalism come along and say, oh, Elon is evil and he should be taxed far more than everybody else, when they don't realize that he's helping American taxpayers pay less by taking these space projects off of the plate of the government. It's ignorant.
Anyway, we invested there because the opportunity, we think, is ultimately for $1.2 trillion of revenues annually. And we're going to probably get 40-50% of those revenues, because we're going to be the backbone for the internet. And that means you have $400 or $500 billion of annualized revenues in 15 years, 20 years. And for that, you're going to be able to get 70 or 80% profit margin. The company today's valued for $150 billion. So that's the satellite business. And the other business is launching to space, where you're going to get transport ordnance around our planet, anywhere on the planet in 35 minutes, anywhere on the planet in 35 minutes. You're able to get to space to do research on space stations, to bring astronauts back and forth to space stations, to get to build a base on the moon, and to get to Mars. So getting to Mars was the mission he had in mind, because he wanted to make sure that if something terrible happens on our planet, the human consciousness will not be snuffed out. But once he had the ability to get a rocket you can use over and over again, now all of a sudden this business comes along, where we can have satellite broadband. Satellite broadband comes from the mission to Mars. Autonomous driving comes from getting electric cars.
Ron Barron owns a fund with thousands of clients managing billions of dollars, and he's got a significant portion of his fund invested in only one man. Me, myself, I have all of my money invested in one man. Of course, that is Elon Musk. And traditional practices tell us that preventing losses should be the best way to maximize your compound annual growth. But here's an important man that Ron tells us about, who worked at Apple and got recruited by Tesla to go work for Tesla. And he paints a picture of the contrast in leadership that helps us understand why we make this decision and why we all are betting on Elon.
So I said, well, so why did you leave Apple to go to Tesla? He said, well, Ron, at Apple, I had a very important role there. And Tim and Steve Jobs never came to visit me once, not once. And when he's at Tesla, Elon comes in every quarter for a couple, 3 hours, and we talk. And he comes off initially with a big, broad question, and then he drills down. And the question, he says, I can answer the question first, and then he keeps drilling down. And he says, oh my God, how could he ask that question? How do I not know the answer to that one? So the basic is, he says, there is not another company that he's aware of where there's a brilliant engineer with a photographic memory who remembers everything and can transport information that he gets from one area to another. So he's a brilliant guy. He cares about everything he does, and he is interested in how everything works.
Elon doesn't even take a salary from Tesla. He gets paid on stock-based compensation and is rewarded when Tesla hits certain valuation targets, meaning that Elon only makes money when the shareholders are also making money. He believes firmly in execution, in performance, and as a growth investor, I can't imagine a better system for growth than that. But that doesn't mean he is a reckless leader either. He is maneuvering this current macro environment with extreme caution, doing everything he can to bolster Tesla's cash pile heading into a potential recession. Don't forget, he studied physics and business at university, majoring in both. He is perfectly qualified to lead Tesla and has done so marvelously for 15 years.
And Walter Isaacson tells me, who wrote the book on Elon, tells me he's walking through, he was with him for 2 years. And he says, I have one example, Ron, he says, I'm walking through a plant with him and some engineers working on a valve that they can't figure out how to make it work. And Elon looks at it as he's just on the fly, looks at it, he says, do this, boo, 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 do this, and then keeps walking. They try it and it works. And so everything this guy does is like that. So now, how do I get comfortable with one person being so brilliant and being in charge? This is like Da Vinci. This is like a businessman. This is Da Vinci. If you are an individual and you are a graduate of a top engineering school, you want to work for either SpaceX or Tesla. So you want to work with other brilliant people. You want to work on a mission. You want to work in something that's really important. You want to work in something that you think is going to be relevant and fascinating with other people like you. And he gets the greatest people. He had 3.5 million people apply for jobs last year at SpaceX and Tesla. 3.5 million people, 30,000 jobs. It's harder to get into getting a job at Tesla and SpaceX than to go into Harvard. But as you grow, I'm betting that he's going to stay alive for at least 5 or 10 years. I think that's a good bet. We'll see.
Of course, that is the risk ran when betting on one man, but I agree with Ron here that this is a man who warrants such a bet. I mean, you have 3.5 million people applying for only 30,000 available jobs. That means less than 1% of applicants are hired. Every engineer coming out of college sees what Elon is doing. They are excited about it and they want to learn by him. So I'm not the only one, nor is Ron, who sees that Elon has a lot left in the tank and that he's probably not accomplished even a fraction of everything he's going to accomplish in his lifetime.
So I started as an analyst in 1970, and I was in debt and living in my friend's basement, and I had $600 of cash. And my credit was so bad that when I wanted to get a telephone, I couldn't get a telephone. They said they don't want a $600 deposit. I said, if I give you $600, I won't have money to get to work and I won't be able to pay the bill every month. And they said, well, I'm sorry, we can't give you a phone. So ultimately, there was a payphone in the lobby, and I asked the doorman to please answer the phone, Ron Barron's residence, Mr. Barron's residence. And so girls will be calling, and so answer the phone, and then just ring me up, and I'll run down the stairs, and they'll think I have a butler. So that was my plan originally.
And Ron Barron is now worth $5 billion and manages $45 billion. I just love stories like that, so I wanted to include that. But here's Ron talking about why he doesn't care about the current geopolitical environment.
In 1968, the GDP of our country was $800 billion. Now $27 trillion. So basically, it's up. So in the 1960s, there were assassinations, there was Vietnam, there was March on Washington, there was civil rights. President Kennedy was assassinated, Martin Luther King was assassinated, Robert Kennedy was assassinated, and yet the Dow Jones was then 1,000. It's now 34,000, 34 times, and the GDP was then 800 billion. It's now 27 trillion. And since now we are to 2023, we had a pandemic, we have a war going on in Ukraine, we have a horrible war going on in Israel, and yet the market's up 34 times. And with 1 year of good news, 1 year, 1989, when the wall came down between East and West Germany, 1 year the news was good. Every other year it's been bad news.
Buy and hold, baby. Who said that pessimists are the best investors? Because Ron Barron ignores the FUD. He just finds great companies and holds on to them. Even right now for Tesla over the next 12 months, things feel like they maybe are moving a little bit slower than they have in the past because the cost of capital is so high right now. But with Tesla, you just never know when the next breakthrough is coming. You never know when that next milestone of growth is hit or when the market recognizes FSD. So in my opinion, it's safer to hold for the long term than it is to sell into uncertainty with hopes of buying back at a lower price.
I think SpaceX has a chance to be even bigger than Tesla in the 2030s. And that's saying a lot because I think Tesla can go from being worth 600 or 700 billion now to being worth $4.5 trillion in 10 years. And in SpaceX by 2030 can be worth 500 billion, 600 billion. And I think that ultimately it can be bigger than Tesla. So that's one area. You don't find a lot of these companies. And therefore, when you find them, you better keep them.
A great way to end from Ron. And again, if you guys want to see what I think Tesla will be worth in 2035, the link to my valuation model is in the description. And please let me know what you think it will be worth in 2035 down in the comments below. Have a great day, everyone.